I'm Tom Blake with Remember Jerusalem, and this time of the year is the season of redemption, as Pentecost or Shavuot is this Sunday. In Acts 2, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit took place on Shavuot or Pentecost, and this is one of the biblically appointed times and was commanded in Leviticus 23 as a remembrance of the giving of the law or the Mosaic covenant on Mount Sinai. I want to show you the connection between the Passover, the resurrection of Yeshua, and Shavuot. This time of the year, beginning with Passover, is one connected season of redemption and not separate, unrelated events. So, how do we know that they're all connected? Well, the followers of Yeshua know that he had to die as the Passover lamb in accordance with the biblical calendar. But many people don't know that the resurrection of Yeshua is also foreshadowed in the biblical calendar. While it doesn't say the resurrection of Yeshua, Leviticus 23 describes this commandment to bring the first fruits of the harvest to the Lord. Similar to Yeshua, this barley harvest is life to the community after a long winter. However, God commands them not to eat any of the barley harvest until they have offered the first fruits of it on a very specific day. Now, this day is to be the day after the Sabbath of the Passover. So just as God gave Israel a specific day for the sacrifice of the Passover lamb, the first fruits were brought to the Lord on a specific day related to the Passover sacrifice. Now, this day after the Sabbath of Passover was when they were to bring the first fruits offering and was the very day of the resurrection of Yeshua. So over 1,000 years before Yeshua, God gave Moses the context and the intimate connection between Yeshua's death and resurrection. In 1 Corinthians 15:20, Paul, a Jewish theologian, sees this important continuity between Yeshua and the appointed times of Israel. He connects this reality of Yeshua's resurrection on first fruits when he says that Yeshua is the first fruits of the dead. But what does all this have to do with Shavuot? Well, Passover is the reference point for Shavuot. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, interestingly, unlike the other main festivals, the Bible does not give Shavuot a specific date to celebrate it. But what it says is that Shavuot is to be celebrated 50 days after the first fruits. So now we can see this important connection between these three events, because without Passover and first fruits, then we wouldn't know when Shavuot was to be held. So Shavuot then is this completion of the Passover or redemption season. And then Jesus says something very interesting related to this in John 16:7. And here's what he says. "But I tell you the truth, it is to your advantage that I go away. For if I don't go away, the comforting counselor will not come to you. However, if I do go, I will send him to you." So, why would Jesus say this? A look at the original Passover and Shavuot as context for the Shavuot of Acts 2 that Yeshua is speaking about will give us some insight into his words. So, the original Passover was about the redemption from Egypt, and it foreshadowed the Passover redemption in Yeshua. And so, since we know now that Passover and Shavuot are connected, how does the Shavuot at Mount Sinai foreshadow the Shavuot in Acts 2? Well, this is where the text of the New Covenant becomes very important. In Jeremiah 31, the text of the New Covenant is given to us. And verse 33 says that the law will be written on our hearts. So what's taking place? Well, the Mount Sinai Shavuot gave the details on how to live this newly redeemed life in God through particular laws or commandments. And the Acts 2 Shavuot, through the power of the Holy Spirit, wrote that Mount Sinai law on our hearts, on the hearts of God's people. And it happened on this very same day in the biblical calendar. This is no accident. And so it's because of this that it is to our advantage that Yeshua went away, so that the Holy Spirit would empower us to keep the law. And so we should look at Passover and the resurrection of Yeshua and Shavuot as one unified season of redemption. It's because of the outpouring of the Holy Spirit at Shavuot that we are able to live a life worthy of the redemption that He paid such a high price for. So a good practical application this week in preparation for Shavuot is to read Exodus 19 and 20, the original Shavuot that happened at Mount Sinai, and then read Acts 1 and 2. Acts 1 and 2, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit in this great Shavuot. And then finally read Joel 2 and 3 as this future outpouring of the Holy Spirit. So may the Lord bless you this Shavuot, and remember Jerusalem.